guys, I'm Katie Roome from ParaPsisPress.com, where I review indie sci-fi and fantasy books. Welcome to the Reading Room. The Thing from HR by Roy M. Griffis. Hot Blood. I was just settling down at my desk with a nice hot cup of the blood of a thrice-cursed dead man when I heard the squawker outside my office rumble. HR, may I help you? My secretary, Bug, answered in her most professional, hideous shriek. I'd lowered my proboscis into the steaming brew, waiting for that lovely first jolt of hell-bound hemoglobin to land upon the parched, empty place where there should have been a soul, when I perceived that most dreaded event just beyond the entrance to my foul lair. A moist, tearing noise thundered at my ear-hole. Oh, bother. Bug was flapping a fluid limb at me frantically. From the squishiness of the sound I deduced she was using her fourth tentacle, that fluid, writhing thing of power and horror. Another wet snap. The first cup of blood was so satisfying, or damned good as we like to call it, that initially I refused to leave the place where I hunkered and gibbered. Instead, one of my eye stalks slithered along the lair wall and protruded outside. She buried the squawker under her other 14 tentacles and hissed, "It's beef bits!" Oh, bother indeed. It was himself. Itself, really. His nibs. The big kahuna. I'm assigned to the HR, if my esoteric vocabulary were not enough to hip you in, old bean. I slid the beaker of blood to one side and cringed before the squawker. Human Restraint Office, how may I be of service? Do take me off speaker, nephew. It was then that the terror washed over me. A call from the head of our division was bad enough, but now our family connection was mentioned. For long eons I withered before the karma-rending power of he who must not be named in casual conversation, only occasionally able to blubber helpless replies. Yes, I'm new to the division, your abominableness. 400 years. No, oh, most loathsome of the shadows, I'm certified. However, I've never actually... But it was my final piercing shriek of despair that brought Bugs scuttling into the lair, where she found me upon the corpse-strewn floor, my 1,000 eye stalks alternatively flagellating me and quivering loosely. That must have been a fun chat, she observed helpfully. What did the bits want? Unable to speak coherently for a moment, I rocked and wailed at the horror of my fate. She politely rewarmed the blood, while I composed myself. Unable to bear the weight of my destiny while prone, I climbed to my hooves and I composed myself. Brushing my eyes back into order, I crept into the comfort of my tatty bones-of-hanged-men chair. After a restorative slobber of the hot hemo, I looked at her terrifying primary face, where sat her usual expression of tolerant compassion for my lot. It's worse than you can imagine. A smile of hideous knowledge rested upon her ancient face. I can imagine a lot. I buried my head in my hand, eye stalks drooping to cover what would have been a face. The boss is sending me to Earth. And then Bug screamed. To my more cosmopolitan readers, the structure of our existence, one cannot really say life, is so self-evident as to require neither comment nor inquiry nor even notice. However, some of the readers of my modest monograph may not exist in the realms where hope liveth not, thus very little of my scientific investigation will make sense to them. I beg my more learned correspondents to bear with me as I endeavor to bring a certain cultural context to my tale. It was the seer H.P. Lovecraft, known by some of my kind as HPV, that is, Howard Phillips, visionary, who first perceived what lurked beyond the veil of mortal human life and quickly began babbling about it to those who had the wit to hear. His knowledge was incomplete, imperfect, and I've been told quite poorly composed, so the forbidden knowledge he shared was taken for little more than passionately felt diverting tales. Even one who sees dimly, as did HPV, can scry some of the truth of a thing. But the truth is so much more than Lovecraft's fevered brain was able to communicate or contain. As I was taught by older and wiser non-beings than myself, my kind have existed for eons uncountable here in the realms beyond time and the ken of men. There are those whose names it is not wise to utter in the lower realms. You know of dead Cthulhu who lies dreaming, of course, an essential essence so bewilderingly terrifying to human senses, whom the seer Lovecraft could only describe by suggesting an amalgam of terrestrial animals, whose names escape me at the moment. Perhaps an Octopi, with the head of an octopus or some such nonsense. The dread one possesses an intelligence so vast, and a sanity-rending reality so utterly alien to any form of life or non-life, that not even such as we are completely sure what, as the Cthulhu Sentai have been known to call him, the Big C actually is, or truly wants. He is not the only lightly star in our dark galaxy, however. There's Herkuth, the black sun of Lemuria, Ferithius, the stealer of breath, and one ignores Vicordigandu, the matrix of the primordial slime, at their peril. They, along with many others too terrible to mention, lurk in the blackness from which light never flees. All of them, and there are a surprising number of beings of malevolent energies, equally pre-time entities, with aims as inscrutable as he who is dead asleep. As charming as these fellows sound, they hold a deep and typically fatal fascination for some humans and other life forms from the dimensions of light. Somehow humans and Pleiadians and Greys and smartly dressed cockroaches and numberless other intelligent life forms keep finding their way here, which, being outside of time and space, is not precisely a place or a now. These allegedly intelligent beings are seeking, something. And that is where we come in. We are staff, as it were, servants of the Big C and his ilk. In fact, of the many surprises that await those misguided seekers who find their way to us, the most striking fact is perhaps the fact that our activities in this place are so well organized. I'd like to think that we have in fact been a most useful model for organizations on the other side, because our template of tedium and terror has been repeated through countless worlds. I have no proof of this. I am very busy yet very unimportant after all, but I plan on mounting a study of the subject before I retire. But I digress. There are subordinate beings of staggering potency, such as my uncle, a mighty one who communes with our silent masters and keeps us ever in readiness for the moment of unmaking. There are those below him, powerful still, who organize and oversee the work of implementing our mission statement. I'll not record that unspeakable document here, for it contains over 75,000 clauses that would be largely incomprehensible to humans, such as never give a cat power, which Earth's ancient Egyptians ignored to their everlasting regret. Others hop, slither, shamble — I am noted for the quality of my shambling, if I do say so myself — stumble or ooze through the hierarchy unnaturally. The delirious hounds of the Wintgunwu, the shrieking baboons from beyond the veil, and of course the mailmen of Kismet, to enumerate but a few. Then, at the bottom of the org chart, there are such as Bug and I, Shaggoths. We are created as servants of the outer darkness, instruments of the often silent will of the dread Dark Ones, lesser beings in our civilization, to be sure, but far more powerful than any human. Or Pleiadians. Those fellows are insufferable about their spiritual advancement, and for such highly evolved beings they certainly seem to wander in the lands where madness reigns, far more often than the mere chance would seem to support. The forms of a Shaggoth vary for reasons I really can't go into here, but suffice it to say that we are the stuff of a nightmare that is teetering on the edge of madness with just a soupçon of raving. It's not glamorous work, nor glorious, but it is vital, and I felt this expository digression was necessary to ensure my gentle reader, regardless of their species or status as quick or non-living, might more fully grasp the import of this modest account of my experiences down there. Detached duty was the official term used by his maleficence, but the truth was, as are most truths in our dark dominion, far more excruciating. I was being sent down amongst the humans. After conveying this brutal fact to Bug, I collapsed into a heap of ivory tears. Good Bug regained her composure after her unseemly outburst and cooed, "Now then, what's all this about now? You studied those hairless apes, did you not?" "That was ages ago." I could not help but wail in my torment, and it was only an elective class. "But you are interested," she said encouragingly. "You do keep up with them. I've heard you chatting with the damned ones before they're sent out for tidying up." I snivelled into the cooling mug of blood. "Well, they're right there for processing, and they look so confused by it all." I gathered the sight of their bodies, typically turned inside out as a result of their messing about with things man is not meant to know, tends to render their remaining essence rather nervously chatty, and a great deal more congenial to correction about the reality of unseen but only hoped at or deeply feared realms. "That's right," Bug went on sweetly, laying several soothing tentacles across my brows and using a few of the others to massage away the tension in my somewhat shapeless bulk. "Think of it as a little field trip, eh? You'll get to be surrounded by the wee humans and what was it Beef Bits wanted you to do?" "My uncle," I announced morosely, "has asked that I observe a certain troublesome group of humans." It was a rather vague request, as these things tend to go. He had emphasized the troublesome part of the brief, now that I thought about it. The suckers of her tentacles began to bite savagely into my skin. As I relaxed against the pleasant situation, she said, "It sounds like a great responsibility, Nargla." "How so?" Yes, right there, dear bug. She set to, flailing at my hide with her tentacles, adding, well, naturally, they'd only send a very capable and daring Shaggoth to that nasty, superstitious place. It's a backwater, I said in distress, starting to stand, her tentacles wrapped around the arms of the bone chair, pinioning me there. Which is why they need you, the most educated being to ever run the Human Restraint Office. I relaxed again under the twin assaults of her sound thumping of my upper thorax, and her equally sound reasoning. Most of the lesser elder things do think that HR is a joke, an impediment to getting their job done. Yes, of course, she cooed again. I winced at that, for I knew that on a distant planet several galaxies across the hall a tiny subspecies of newt had suddenly exploded into extinction. But such are the burdens of our power. And you are just the shambling horror to prove them wrong. By the name of the unnameable, I dare say you are right. Oh, I know I am, she said in a teasing way. Will there be anything else, O Lord of the Fungi? I waved the flattery away. Pish! Could you be a love and fetch me a hot pint of something a little mellower? I gestured at the coagulating blood. Perhaps a dram of an occasional blasphemer? Right away, sir, she replied with a wink, punctuating it with a saucy smack of a tentacle tip against my proboscis. Dear bug, what would I ever do without her? Thus fortified, I turned to my necromail to resume my duties unending. This has been The Thing from HR by Roy M. Griffis. If this has sounded interesting to you, I encourage you to pick it up. If you would like to know more about it, I did a full-length positive review on my website. I'm Katie Roome from periapsispress.com, where I review indie sci-fi and fantasy books. This has been The Reading Room. Thank you for joining me.